Welcome everyone, Erev Tov. So tonight we're doing a Pesach Q&A. As I had said, these are all real questions. There's one that I decided to include in there because I thought it'd be helpful, but these are all real questions that I've gotten, including from some of you who are on the class now. And then as we go through the questions, I'll pause and make sure that my explanation is clear. Are there any follow-ups or related ones? And then at the end, we'll open it up for more questions. And I will say that if there's a question that anyone asks that I don't know the answer to, which happens, I'm a human being, what I will do is when I post the class, I'll make a quick video of myself at the end, like an addendum answering the question, or I'll put in a comment like the relevant source. And whoever asked it, I will follow up with them to make sure they actually know what to do. Again, if there's a question I'm not certain about, rather than giving an incorrect answer, particularly with Pesach, where we are extra careful. And the reason for that is, in general, we're careful with kashrut because it's forbidden, but on Pesach, the penalty for eating chametz during Pesach is quite bad, cut off from God, not a good thing. So we take it very seriously. And in fact, it's probably one of, if not the most followed holidays, and Jews, including my grandmother, Aleha Hashalom, who was not observant, but during Pesach, I would have eaten in her house. Anyone would eat in her house. That's how seriously she and many Jews take Pesach. So without further ado, welcome Ken, we'll jump into it. So I've broken these down into sections. And again, within each section, I'll pause for additional relevant comments. So the first practical questions I get is koshering the kitchen. There are obviously a lot of different parts of the kitchen. I did not include every koshering of the kitchen here, but if people have more, that's what this space is for. I will say that there's some different opinions about, for example, when koshering a microwave or a stovetop and running the fires. We'll talk about how long to do it. So in general, I hold by the opinions of Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, who's a rabbi in Israel. He is not modern Orthodox, but the way that he approaches Jewish law, the way that he respectfully brings in multiple opinions, and even if he's strict in his footnotes or in his main point, he will mention other opinions and say that they are totally valid. So this is actually just a beautiful idea in the Talmud about the two schools of Shammai and Hillel and why we follow Hillel, because whenever they would argue, Hillel would always say to Shammai, I want to hear what you say first. I want to take it seriously. I want to discuss it. And then once I've given you respect, then I'd like to say my opinion. So Rabbi Melamed really lives by that principle. And not only is he brilliant and his opinions are pretty mainstream, but because of the way he approaches Jewish law with this open mind, I generally hold by his rulings. So with that in mind, the first thing in koshering the kitchen is this principle in the laws of kashrut, which in Hebrew, I wrote it transliteration, it's kebol-o kach polto. The way that the treif or non-kosher thing is absorbed, I mean, the way that treif, pig, meat and milk, whatever it is, gets into the bowl, pot, etc., that's the way you get it out. Easy way to understand it. If you have a pot, you fill it with water, and then you accidentally pour in meat and milk at the same time, the way that meat and milk gets sucked up into the pot, making it not kosher, is through hot boiling water. So the answer for how do you get the treif out of the pot is through hot boiling water. So we're going to apply that principle to all of these questions. So the first one is, how does one kosher a microwave? And the first and pretty much every step for koshering anything is clean it. And you don't have to use an astringent that would burn the metal off of a tank or something like that. Just make sure there's no actual food on it. And if you've cleaned it as much as possible and there's still a stain on there, at this point, that stain, it's hard to consider it food anymore. If you have still wool and it won't ruin the pot or whatever it is, work a little hard, put some elbow grease into it. But if you've done what is reasonable and there's still something left behind, it's not food anymore, and you don't need to worry about it as much, especially with the next thing you're going to do. So with a microwave, one part of a microwave is the glass plate. And there's a whole debate about whether or not glass can be koshered. Sephardic Jews say it doesn't need to be koshered. It can never become treif in the first place. And Ashkenazi Jews say not only can it become treif, but it can never be koshered once it's treif. So the compromise opinion of Rabbi Melamed, there's two options. One is to take that glass plate out and pour boiling water. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. Get an electric kettle or use a pot on the stove and use oven mitts. Always use oven mitts when working with boiling water. I learned that the hard way. And then just pour it over the glass plate when it's in a sink. Or if you you can't boil, you don't want to pour boiling water over the glass plate, or you want to be a little extra strict. Whenever you cook anything in a microwave that you koshered on Pesach, put some sort of barrier, paper towel, paper plate between the Pesach plate or the food and the glass plate. Again, the stricter opinion is you can leave the glass plate in there. Actually, the strictest opinion is to not use the glass plate at all. That's obnoxious. Some people are that strict. The middle opinion is put something between the glass plate in a microwave and whatever you put on top of it. And then a very valid opinion that Rabbi Melamed mentions is just pour boiling water over the plate. And then to kasher the microwave, and then I'll pause for questions, is get a glass or a mug. And it's not clear if it needs to be a kosher for Pesach one. So I always suggest using one of those disposable coffee cups that you can pour boiling water into when you're making coffee. Fill it to the top with water, put it in the microwave that's clean. And usually you want to wait 20, I didn't put this here, clean the microwave, wait 24 hours, then do this last step, which is put the cup in the microwave, run it for about 10 or 15 minutes, then open the microwave, carefully use like an oven mitt or something, move the cup to another spot. And the reason is the spot under the cup is not koshered because it was being covered by the cup. So now move it to another location in the microwave, run it for another 10, 15 minutes. I mentioned here, some say longer. Some say run the microwave so long as it evaporates all the water. That's a little dangerous. So I don't know if I encourage that. Some will say 15, 20 minutes, but basically if the water in the cup starts boiling and evaporating, that steam, which again, that's the way that a microwave would become treif because of treif steam coming out. So this cup of clean water, let the steam come out, 10, 15 minutes, move the cup over, another 10, 15 minutes, let the steam come out, boom, the microwave is kosher. So now I will pause for practical questions about koshering the microwave. And again, just throw up your hand if you have any. If not, we'll move on. Yeah, Ken, go ahead and unmute on your side. And I'll let you know when we can hear you. Yeah, go for it, Ken, please.
Yeah, we have a combination microwave convection oven. If we don't use a convection oven on Passover, could we still kosher the inside? I never thought to ask. Still kosher the inside doing this or not?
That's an interesting question. That may be one of the things where I'd want to check and follow up because I've not used that. Is that where it's like one unit in one?
Yeah.
So all I'll say is this. Generally, things like toaster ovens are assumed to not be kosherable because of the size of them. Well, actually, like general big ovens, because of the space, it becomes easier. So I will say this. I am not sure. That's something that I will directly follow up with you on. And I will post something in post to answer that question. Again, the reason I'm not sure is I know that generally toaster ovens cannot be koshered. So a lot of it has to do with the technology of it and how it works. In principle, it shouldn't be an issue. But again, most hold that microwaves are generally fine and ovens are fine. But when you get in the middle, there are other potential issues.
Okay.
So I will follow up with you directly and then I'll post something in the class. But great question. Great question. See, I don't always think of these. One of my rabbis at yeshiva, we'd ask him about things like foods. Oh, is this kosher? How do you check it for bugs? And he said, I don't know. I've never eaten it before. Now, a rabbi should know about things he doesn't have experience with. But sometimes that's reality. Things that are totally different technologies that are foreign to a rabbi, they have to learn about it first. So the next one there is a stovetop, and that's the easiest of all. So the first thing, of course, is to clean it as best you can, clean the grates and stuff like that. Now, with a stovetop, the way that it cooks, hopefully you're not spilling water on it, but the way that it cooks is intense heat. So if something were to spill on it, the absorption, the treif would get into it through intense heat, through fire, but the way it gets in is fire. So the way it gets out or koshered is through fire. But stovetops are constantly intensely hot, meaning that technically speaking, stoves might get treif for 2 seconds, but the second you keep using them, they're automatically koshered all the time. Because the fire is like the ultimate way to kosher something because it burns out the treif, it pushes out the taste, pushes out the essence of the non-kosher stuff. So stovetops are technically always constantly being koshered. But on Pesach, we do this extra thorough step, which is we clean it of any spills or crumbs as best we can. You really don't need to you can lift off the grate if you want to get out some of the crumbs, but you don't need to go crazy because again, that doesn't come into contact with the food. And if it's touched the fire, and this is just a general principle with Pesach, some food, especially crumbs, that has been so destroyed by soap, by mold, or by fire that it is like burning chametz, that it's no longer food or edible anymore, it's not an issue of chametz. So we do our best to clean, but if you forgot a tiny crumb that's been there for 45 years, you have not broken Pesach by it being in your house. We do our best, and any actual edible chametz that we're aware of, that we either sell or destroy. So the way to do it, again, clean the stovetop, and you don't need to wait 24 hours. With cleaning pots, microwaves, where you use boiling water to clean them, you wait 24 hours from the last time they were used. With pots and microwaves, you wait 24 hours from the last time they were used when you use boiling water. If you use fire, it is so intense, you don't need to wait at all. So if you have metal countertops, just clean them off and flamethrower away. And Rabbi Melamed's opinion, again, is 15 minutes, and you don't need to wait for it to heat up. It's fire, it heats up right away. If you have an electric stovetop, it is the same principle. It's the exact same principle. Maybe if it takes a few minutes to warm up, you could add 5 minutes to this, but really, as long as it gets to the heat, the highest heat possible, and that's the key, you have to turn it to the highest heat it can possibly go, fire or electric or whatever it is, let it get to its highest heat, run for about 15 minutes, turn it off, let it cool down, boom, that's it, instantly koshered. Because that intense heat is how the treif gets in, that's how it gets out. Yes, Jane, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
So my cooktop is more like a countertop. It's flat, it doesn't have grates or anything like that. So do you still treat it like a stove? Or do you treat it like a countertop?
Yeah, so we have the same thing, an electric countertop, and exactly the same thing. You just clean it, and it's obviously a lot easier to clean because you don't have to worry about grates and stuff like that. You just spray it, clean it, and again, especially when you're using cleaning agents, the issue you're concerned with, I left behind a stain, that stain is chametz. Once you've sprayed cleaning solution on it, imagine that you had a turkey sandwich or a cheese sandwich, and you spray cleaning solution on it. That would kill most people to eat that. So once you've sprayed that stuff on what's on a stove, even if there's a bit of residue or a stain behind, it's not food anymore. It can no longer be considered chametz because it is so made disgusting, pagum, deficient, and just absolutely disgusting. It's no longer chametz. Again, do the best you can, but once you've done that, it's very like cleaning dishes. You can be not lenient per se, but you don't have to lose your mind because soap makes any treif or bad stuff, it just destroys it. So that's stovetops. And the last one in this kosher section is a tea kettle. Now, tea kettles are interesting because one thinks that with tea kettle, it doesn't come into contact with food. All that's in there is hot water. And strictly speaking, one could probably be lenient. However, there's two issues. One is food could potentially splash on it. That could happen depending on whether it's a plug-in tea kettle or one on the stove. It could happen. But the second one that people don't think about is I have a cup, and an hour ago, I made, a hot toddy or something like that has chametz in it. Now I take my hot tea kettle, I pour it into the teacup, that hot water hits the teacup, it brings, and again, a lot of this you have to kind of open your mind a little bit. It gets a little bit symbolic, but somewhat literal. That hot water goes into this chametz-filled mug, and then the steam that comes out of it has chametz essence in it, and it goes back up into the tea kettle. Now, again, you kind of got to stretch your mind to think about it, but essentially the molecules of chametz come out of the mug and might go into the tea kettle. So the way to clean it is just really easy. Again, just actually clean it, fill it with some soap and water and rinse it out. Not a big deal. And then again, the way that it might have gotten unkosher is by boiling water in it. So how do you fix it? Boil water in it. And tea kettles are particularly easy because they're meant to boil. Now that's how you clean the inside of it. But some of them are like sealed, except for a little thing you lift off. So how do you clean the outside? And this is true for all kinds of items in the kitchen, is you boil another pot and you carefully use oven mitts, put your tea kettle in the sink, bring the boiling pot of water over, and you just pour it on the outside of your tea kettle. And now inside and outside, totally kosher. And unlike dipping in a mikvah, it does not need to be all at once. You can kosher part of it at a time. But as long as boiling water touches the whole inside of it and the whole outside of it, you're golden, you're good to go. That's the kitchen. And the principles I've just shared, you can pretty much apply that to more or less everything. And again, I'll follow up, Ken, about the convection oven, which it could be a 2-second answer. I just want to make sure I'm giving accurate information. So any questions on koshering in the kitchen? Either one. I didn't. Oh, Ken, you just got to unmute again. Or I could learn sign language. It's also I'll let you know when we can hear you.
It's not a big deal if you forget or you get too busy. It doesn't matter.
No, but I appreciate it, but it's valuable for me, and hopefully if I can include it as an addendum to the video for anyone who has it, because the more I learn, the more I'm able to help people. Excellent. All right, so the next section here could be 50 pages long, but it's specifically based on real questions that I got from people, and within it, we can learn a couple of general principles. So I'll say the issue, but the challenge with items of kashrut is there's the basic laws of kashrut, which is there's certain animals to not eat. And for kosher animals, there's a way to slaughter them. And then we can't mix milk and meat, and chickens are considered that. And also checking vegetables for bugs. That's pretty much the basics of kashrut. So why can't we just go by ingredients, all this basic, kashrut should be way simpler. The reason it's so complicated and we need all of these kosher symbols, or at least we think we need all these kosher symbols, is we don't know what's happening in factories. It might be that one conveyor belt makes shrimp scampi, or is that a soup, whatever, it makes shrimp, and then they just kind of spray it down with cold water and then put, potato chips on it. That's an exaggeration. For allergens and lots of laws, they don't do stuff like that, but you do have factories where you might make a snack that is pareve, but it's made on the same thing where they had dairy cookies. And there might be some residue of dairy left behind it. And for Pesach, same thing with chametz. There's two issues there. One is there's a lot of products that are chemical-based that are not really food, but they're used in the production or processing of products, and they're often made with chametz, or for Ashkenazim, kitniot, things like legumes, corn, et cetera, like that. And because they're a secondary agent, they don't always list it in the ingredients. So because of that, that's why we have such a big industry around Pesach items. Now, as I pointed out, certain items, it's never an issue. Water does not need to be kosher for Pesach. It's water. Apples don't need to be kosher for Pesach. Tinfoil, soap, toothpaste, things that are not food, it doesn't need to have a special certification. But the reason we can't just assume that certain products are just fine for Pesach, even though we're like, what could be wrong with this? It might have to do with the process of how they're made. And I am not an expert in the kashrut industry. There's a Rabbi Zusha Blech, who is one of the greatest experts in the kashrut industry. He wrote a whole massive book about industrial kashrut. And at the end of the day, the people who know that, it's not because they've learned the Shulchan Aruch and the law better. It's because they're involved direct in the industry. They go to the factories and they find out what's involved in the process. I have learned a lot about that, and a lot of those laws I've learned. But at the end of the day, the reason that the Chicago Rabbinical Council and the Orthodox Union print these Pesach guides is not because people are not capable of learning the laws of Pesach and rabbis don't know the laws. It's because the food industry is constantly changing and using new ingredients. So with that in mind, someone asked me about a couple of products, and here's the ruling on them. Someone asked about Arizona iced tea. So Arizona iced tea, again, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but again, the place it's processed, also, as we'll see in a moment, the way that tea is made often includes ingredients that might include chametz or kitniot. So Arizona iced tea is not kosher for Pesach. Someone asked a fascinating question, corn tortillas. Now, these are definitely not kosher for Pesach, but I think the reason they asked this, my guess, is because they're thin. They look like matzot. So the question is, why couldn't that be okay? And in fact, I've given a class on soft matzah. If you make dough and you don't let it rise and you cook it the way that they did for thousands of years on a rock or an oven and something in a typical way of cooking it, and it would be kosher matzah, it would not be a thin cracker. It would be something like a tortilla or more like a pita. But the reason corn tortillas are not kosher is for two reasons. One is corn is considered kitniot. And the second thing is that many things is the place it's made is not a place that's kosher for Pesach. And also the process of it, there may actually be some leavening in it, meaning it may have risen a little bit at some point. But even though it's thin, it has to be, the ingredients have to be just water and flour. And this is corn. So that's not okay. And you could say, fine, so what about a wheat tortilla? Again, there's lots of ingredients in it, and it's possible that I could leaven. Is it possible to make matzah kosher that's basically a tortilla? 100%. But a regular tortilla that's usually kosher for the rest of the year, is that kosher for Pesach because it's so thin? No, because it's not made in a chametz-free factory. So there could be other chametz ingredients in it that were leavened. And in the process, there may have been leavening in it. Is it possible that technically speaking, I've never made a tortilla. is it possible, in fact, Ken, you might have more insight into this because I think you don't have insight into this. Is it possible that technically speaking, the way they make them might be close to Pesach? Maybe, but a tortilla is not going to be kosher for Pesach according to any opinion, but something similar to it. One could make matzah that is soft. It's totally valid, 100% one can do it. And as I said in another class, one just needs to get flour that is checked and has never come into contact with water. And when they mix the dough and then cook it, again, there's guides for how to do this, but it's totally possible to make soft matzah on Pesach. The next item here, source number 3, someone asked about tea. And tea is, what's wrong with tea? It's literally just leaves. There's no problem there. So it's kind of a compromised position on tea. So as long as a tea is kosher, actually it doesn't even have to be, if it's completely unflavored and there's no other ingredients in except for the tea, so it's just black tea, it's green tea, one does not need special certification for Pesach. So this is actually for the rest of the year, someone could buy just plain green tea without a hechsher at all. There's certain, it's one of those products that you don't need to go crazy on. But if the tea is instant tea, I'm not sure, when I was reading some of the guides for it, I wasn't sure what they meant by instant, but when they decaffeinate tea, some of the products they use in that process often have chametz in them. So decaffeinated tea would need to be with the special simber being kosher for Pesach. But if it's totally unflavored and there's literally nothing, it's just tea leaves, you're good to go. But if it's decaffeinated or if it's flavored, then it has to have a special symbol on it for Pesach or be on one of the special approved lists. And there you can search OU's website. And again, the reason is when they process the ingredients might be added in a place that has chametz, they might have chametz in them. Decaffeinating tea includes ingredients. And again, it's not necessarily always flour-based or wheat-based ingredients. It might be kitniot. So Sephardi may have less of an issue, but definitely for Ashkenazim, you have to, unless it's totally unflavored and totally just straight tea leaves. Yeah, Menachem, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. What about the herbal teas, Rabbi? Is that any different than the unflavored?
So you'd have to, this is one of the things where I've had herbal tea before, but what differentiates it from just plain old green tea? Is it the way they process it or what's in it?
No, I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
So this is one of the nice things about this question, or at least these sources. If someone looks at herbal tea and it's literally just plain tea, and the only thing herbal about it is, if it's herbal because they've added other ingredients, other spices, then they would need special certification. If herbal just, Ken, yeah, if you have insight, this is the thing where like the Shulchan Aruch doesn't include this, and you just learned it on. Yeah, go ahead, Ken, please.
Yeah, well, my son was back there in the early days of Rishi tea for a whole bunch of years. So sometimes herbal tea means that there's no tea leaves in there at all. And since the people who typically make herbal teas or already make teas, it has that general rubric, of tea on it. Yeah. But a lot of teas may use things like barley husks. I think there's a good Korean tea that was made no tea leaves, but it has barley husk and other stuff in it. So there may be other ingredients that are kitniot or that wouldn't be permitted. Or
barley could be real chametz. No, that's really helpful. Yeah, so it sounds like herbal teas, you'd need to get a special certification. Yeah, Eric, as well. Yeah, please. And thank you for that, Ken. Go ahead, Eric, please.
What if it was like mint tea, which means it's just mint leaves? And they could even be mint leaves you grew in your backyard.
So, well, if you make your own tea, then there's much less of an issue. And I've talked with people about taking, with certain alcoholic drinks, they can only be kosher if they're unflavored. Someone said, what if I just add my own flavoring, like I added my own lemons or whatever? Well, that's not an issue there. But again, the general rule is any flavored tea, even if it's flavored mint. I mean, I don't think you usually use, if you just put mint into hot water, then that's not an issue. You don't need a hechsher for that. But if it is flavored with mint, like it's green tea flavored with mint, same thing. It would need special certification. Now, again, this is one of the things I often tell people, especially when they're learning about kashrut. A lot of things probably are 100% fine, but because of the complexity of the kashrut industry, we often err on the side of caution. Meaning this: could I go into a McDonald's and find products that technically I could probably eat? Sure. But McDonald's is not, for a lot of reasons, I would never go into a McDonald's, but there's so many issues in unkosher foods there, I wouldn't do it. Same thing with teas. Are they probably fine, most of the year and even on Pesach? Probably, but because there are issues with some things and it's very complicated, we err on the side of caution. But there are things like water. There's never an issue with water. You just, unless it's flavored. You get into flavorings, it's a whole other story. But just water doesn't need a hechsher even. I think most waters do, but if you find a water in the store and it has a hechsher and it's 10 times as much as an unhechshered one and it's just plain water, don't just buy the cheap one and just be proud of it because you understand the law better that you can do it. So great questions, great insight. So herbal tea Menachem, probably you would need a special certification. So it really just has to be plain teas, just plain unflavored teas, or you need special certification. The last question here, someone who's not on the class, but I'm going to call them because hopefully they'll be happy about this, is about cornstarch. Now, cornstarch is in more things that you could possibly know from using it in cooking, but also on gloves, latex gloves and stuff like that. It has a million different purposes. But the question is, well, it's not chametz, but it's kitniot. So the question is, can you use it on Pesach? And the answer, and this is just a general principle, if it has chametz, let's say it's wheat-based starch, I don't know if they make that, not only can you not eat it, but anything that has chametz, you can't use for anything. So for example, my family has a cat. We give her special wheat and all grain-free cat food, which she doesn't seem to care for the week of Pesach. But you can't use it for anything. You cannot use for if for example there was an oil fluid. I guess something that's not food wouldn't matter as much. I guess if there's an oil fluid with chametz or Play-Doh, which has flour in it, that's not an issue. But any kind of food that's chametz, absolutely not. Cornstarch. For Ashkenazi Jews, it is considered kitniot. And the reason that kitniot I've talked about in the past is the problem. There's a lot of potential reasons. One is because it was used to make bread, so people might be confused, or because when it was in those big burlap sacks, the flour from corn and the flour from legumes look like flour, and they just said, let's be careful across the board. Lots of possible reasons for it. Regardless, Ashkenazi Jews do not eat these kitniot, including corn. So it's not included in our food, but it's not chametz. So the compromise is that, well, we can't use it for any eating. We can use it for us, for the Jews to eat. We can use it for everything else. So we can use it if there's a cornstarch-based thing that's used for, and I don't even know, did I use examples here? Some list somewhere I found examples of what you might use it for, which is like in, I don't know, building a motorcycle or whatever it was. It was weird things I had never thought of. Cleaning shoes, shoe polish, that was one of them. You could use cornstarch on Pesach for shoe polish because you're not using it for food. And this is important. When you're selling your chametz, you do not need to sell your kitniot products. In fact, for the past 2 weeks, I've only been buying kitniot-based cereals, things that have corn in it, so I don't need to worry about getting rid of them or selling them or anything like that. Your kitniot, you don't need to lock it away. You can't eat it, or Ashkenazim don't eat it, but you don't need to go crazy about it. So kitniot-based food for a pet, totally fine to feed that for them. Baby formula that has kitniot in it, that has corn or other products, totally fine, because babies do not have to hold by the custom of not eating kitniot. So while we do not eat cornstarch, it is fine to use for other purposes or to feed to creatures that are not obligated in law, i.e. cats and babies, who are just both absolutely adorable. And that's true for any products that are kitniot based. Again, you don't need to go crazy about getting rid of it. You can't eat it or cook with it, but you can use it for other purposes within and around your house, which may or may not come up, but it's just an important rule. So any questions, because that ends the formal kashrut section. And again, this could be 10,000 pages long, but there's websites that tell you all that. I was trying to do a few examples that taught some principles. Any questions up until now? Yeah, Eric, please. You just got to unmute yourself. Yeah, go for it.
When I heard of like the kitchen flamethrower, what's the name of that?
Blowtorch?
Yes. Is there like a special name for it?
I don't. So I've only ever, I don't even think I saw it before it was used when I was in college. My rabbi, his kitchen, he had like, metal countertops. So I saw the flame. It wasn't a flamethrower. It was like a big blowtorch. I saw it outside of his kitchen. So I didn't actually see him use it. But no, I think And I would probably suggest using boiling water on metal countertops.
Sure.
But if it's all metal and one does it very safely, one could just take the flamethrower. I mean, you could use a Bic lighter as long as the metal gets as hot as it would when hot food spills on it. And that's the key. You don't need, when you're koshering things, you don't need them to get to 10,000 degrees. You just need them to get as hot as they were when food went in. And that heat sucks the food out. And again, some of this is real. Like if I spill, pork juice on something, some of it might get absorbed into it. If I spill pork on wood, that wood might smell like pork for a long time. So the idea of absorption into pots is a real thing. And also someone once said that the pots that were used 500 years ago were really thick walls and really would absorb something. Or if I have a microwave and someone cooks something in there covered, like you can cook kosher food in a trafe microwave as long as it's covered, but then you open it and it still smells like it. And you're like, I know technically this is kosher, but experientially, I can still smell it. So there's a lot of, mixture of reality and relying on ritual rules when we're doing koshering. So at the end of the day, so we don't go crazy, we say, this is what you need to do. Just make it as hot as it was when the food went in to get it out. So please don't burn your house down. And anything with koshering with hot stuff, please always use oven mitts or some other protective gear. And for your feet too, wear shoes or have towels around, because spilling is also a real possibility. Excellent. So the next very quick question, again, very relevant, and I got it today. Oh yeah, Jane, before we go on, go ahead, Jane, please.
So I know that in Israel, they've made some leniencies for mixed marriages of Sephardim and Ashkenazim in terms of kitniot.
Yeah. So
here in America, I'm of Sephardic heritage, but we've always gone by Ashkenazic rules. What does a family do if one is Ashkenazic and one is Sephardic?
So the general practice is quite misogynistic, which is that the family goes by the husband and whatever the husband's custom is. And it is possible for an Ashkenazi man to become Sephardic before a Beit Din, but strictly speaking, a family does want to keep one practice inside the home. Now, to decide which practice that is, again, the only one that I'm familiar with mainstream is generally following by the husband, which again is rather misogynistic, and I'm not familiar with other ones there. So I'd be curious to learn more about what they've done in Israel. But the key here, both for practical kashrut purposes and for peace in the home, is to try and keep one practice. However, there are lots of rules that say, for example, if an Ashkenazi Jew goes to the house of Sephardic Jews who are, they keep strict kashrut, but they eat kitniot, and they've cooked kitniot in their pot. And then they cooked something that was not kitniot in the pot. The Ashkenazi Jew cannot eat the actual dish that has kitniot in it, rice, whatever it is like that, but they can eat food that has been cooked in the pots, because the minhag is to not eat kitniot, but we don't need to be crazy strict on that. So there is probably some room for leniency in a mixed house, whereby let's say, in a household where you have Sephardic practices, to eat rice, and then simply the ones who their practice is Ashkenazi to just not eat that rice. Again, I'm only mentioning, and even though it is, male focused, which is unfair, that's the traditional practice. But halachically speaking, it is possible to have a house in which there is shared kitniot eaten and not eaten. However, one important thing is Sephardim that do eat kitniot, they check like crazy. They get rice, they'll check it 3 or 4 times to make sure there's no chametz or any issues like there. So Sephardim are very, very strict about making sure the kitniot that they do eat, there's no issue of chametz there. They often, not being Sephardic, I imagine in Israel, the Sephardic Jews probably buy kitniot products that are specifically permitted for Pesach. A great example is the Joyvin gel rings, which are the best candy on the face of the earth next to Three Musketeers. But if you go in the Pesach section at any store and you're like, oh, I'll look for the hechsher, and you're like, this is a K. It's just a K. I thought K wasn't kosher, and it's just some rabbi's name. The reason for that is because they have kitniot. So they are kosher for Pesach for Sephardim, or kosher for all Jews the rest of the year. So Ashkenazi Jews, beware. But that's an important thing, is that for Sephardic Jews, they have the same standards and level of kashrut. They just have some different custom there. So one house could share it, but it can get a little tricky. So it's balancing shalom bayit and having one unified practice, but also respecting that just because a woman or a man enters a marriage, they shouldn't have to give up their whole family tradition. But if they're going to their respective parents' house, they go by, they eat whatever there, but an Ashkenazi man going to a Sephardic woman's house, even if they're Ashkenazi at home, he cannot eat the kitniot at their house, but it's fine for the in-laws, whatever, to have it. Great question. So the next question here, also very practical, someone raised it today, is the custom for checking our houses for chametz is that let's say, so this year, Pesach starts Friday night. So the practice is that on Thursday night, we search the house with the feather and the candle and everything like that for chametz. The custom is to set up little pieces of bread so you find something. Strictly speaking, one does not need to. The purpose of that search is literally to find if there's chametz. Technically speaking, if one does the search and they find nothing, they've still fulfilled the mitzvah, and it's still perfectly fine to say the bracha, the blessing. The bracha is not on finding it, the bracha is on searching for it, the checking for it. But one would do that on Thursday night, and then on Friday morning, they would burn the chametz, and they would make this pronouncement: any chametz that I missed is not mine, it's null and void. If I find it, it doesn't belong to me, etc., etc. But what if somebody's leaving Tuesday or Wednesday, and they're going to stay at someone else's house who are doing their own checking of chametz? Do I have to do it at all? And the answer is, if I'm leaving my house more than 30 days before Pesach, I don't have to do anything. My house is just like, it's not my house, and as long as I'm not coming back during Pesach. I leave 30 days before and I'm getting after Pesach, I can just leave my house and sell my entire house. But if you're leaving within 30 days of Pesach, what you do is the night, and it's specifically at night. And the reason it's at night is so there's a specific contrast between the candle or flashlight and the shadows and everything like that. The rabbis considered it easier to find at night. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. But the night before one leaves, they do the berikat chametz, but they do not say a blessing. The blessing is not said because it's not being done at the proper time. It's a necessary action, but it's not being done at the specific proper time. So they do the search for chametz, and then that chametz can be thrown away, sold, whatever they want to do with it, flushed down the toilet. In terms of the burning, they don't have to burn that chametz if they're not going to be in town. Now, if they go on vacation, and the morning of Pesach, they happen to have some crackers, they don't need to search their whole, cruise ship or whatever, but those crackers would need to be destroyed. They would either need to be burned or flushed down the toilet. And there's a word here I put in parentheses, totza'ah, from the word the hotzi, to bring or cause something out. The point of the mitzvah, as the Torah says, is not to search for the chametz. The point of the mitzvah is to make sure chametz is not there. So the mitzvah is not the searching, the mitzvah is to make sure that chametz is gone. So that can be done by burning it, throwing it in the sea, flushing it down the toilet. That's my goal. As long as I've made sure that's done, I fulfilled the mitzvah. But the pronouncement, any chametz that I have, should still be said on the morning, meaning Friday morning. So someone is leaving Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, they check their house with no blessing, they flush or toss that out in the outside trash bins. And then this Friday morning, in the morning, they would wake up, and at some point early in the morning, before you can't eat chametz anymore, they would say that pronouncement in Aramaic or English, as long as you understand it, chol hamiyah, et cetera, et cetera. So any questions on that? And the person who asked that question not only is on this call right now, but they heard my son in the background. When I said, oh, you could burn it or flush it down the toilet, and my son lost his mind. You can't flush food down the toilet because then you can't eat it anymore. Which I had to explain to my son, that's the point of flushing it down the toilet, because you want to destroy it. So if you flush food down the toilet, don't expect to get it back and eat it later. And the last section here is just very basic. Again, this has been a challenging couple of years for Pesach, and some people are still not quite ready for a Seder. And even not because of COVID, not everyone is always able to find a Seder, or they're only able to find one, and they do it on their own. Now, some people have gotten to be experts at that and know the ins and outs, but for those who don't, the Orthodox Union made this incredible guide. And if you Google OU condensed ritual guide, it's like a 5-10 page document or something like that. It goes through all of the details and beautiful, clear guidelines for what to do, what to say, et cetera, like that. And here at the bottom, holidays, ritual guide, Passover, but just Google it. But if someone's like, what is the absolute minimum that I have to do, including the blessings? And they just lay it out here. Eating matzah, drinking 4 cups of wine, eating the maror, because there's a blessing on all of these things so far, the story is the most important thing. And by the way, fulfilling the mitzvah of the story, reading it out of the Haggadah is not the only way to do it. As long as someone tells the story from us getting into Egypt, what we did there, God taking us out, and does it in a condensed way, in a abridged way. There's a million that reads a comic book of it. As long as someone tells the story to themselves or those with them, that fulfills it. The Haggadah is a beautiful way to do it, but it is not the only way to do it. But there is an explicit mitzvah in the Torah. These are the mitzvot from the Torah, except for the cups of wine, but that is a rabbinic mitzvah to do. But everything else in here is explicitly in the Torah. And the final one, again, it's a rabbinic mitzvah, which is the Psalms of Hallel, which again can be said in Hebrew or in the English. So having a Haggadah is important, but these are the absolute minimum, which means that if someone says, I want to do a Seder, but I can't do the whole thing, or I can't do it all in Hebrew, that's fine. And there are absolutely, you can go on Amazon or you can go online. And if I remember, I'll share a link. There are plenty of abridged Haggadot. And in no way is it shortchanging Pesach. It is a recognition that for people on their own or small groups of people who don't know the ins and out, it is just as meaningful to have a simplified Seder. In fact, it might be more meaningful because they're not getting lost in all of the reading that can take away from the experience. One who can do the full 17-hour Seder, beautiful, but not everyone can do that. And I'm here to say that's okay. If you can do a very simple Seder where you have 4 cups of grape juice and you eat some matzah and you eat maror, which again, a piece of lettuce. You can eat a piece of lettuce. It doesn't have to be horseradish. In fact, at my house, we have horseradish on the side, but we actually do the mitzvah with a piece of lettuce. I've tried endives. They're terrible, so I'm not doing that ever again. That's beautiful. And to tell the story. Those are the core components of a Pesach Seder. And God willing, next year, more and more people will be hosting and everybody can find a place for both nights. Actually, sorry, next year we'll be in Yerushalayim, so there'll only be one night of Pesach. It'll be so much easier. Thank you, Ken, for that.